At C3, we believe when people from different backgrounds come together, we bring more than just our skills. We bring our stories, our lessons, and our best practices. The C3 Way is more than just a learning platform. It's a philosophy. It's our shared commitment to blending the best of who we are and where we've been, combining our experiences, innovations, and insights into a learning journey that's uniquely C3. We are excited to invite you to experience our video series, The C3 Way.
In case we need to share with anybody who wasn't able to make it today, but appreciate you guys all taking some time aside to attend today's training. Today's training is on C3's best practices for interviewing. So if you guys are here, that means that you guys are involved in our interview process, or we would like to, at some point get you involved, and we want to make sure that we get you guys just up to speed and so with some friendly reminders on best practices, effective interviewing tips, all that good stuff. And we want to make sure that we're all aligned on the C3 way of how we want to manage that. So I'm going to go through the agenda shortly. So this is basically everything you need to know about conducting successful interviews to find the best possible fit for your teams. So the agenda for today, we're going to be going over conducting successful interviews, behavioral interviewing, interview calibration, and interview do's and don'ts. And Lindsay will be chiming in towards the end of the presentation just to cover more of like HR topics, things that are okay to ask and not okay to ask. So anybody have any questions before we dive in?
No, but I really like this. I just went through the interview process and I had to kind of Google search questions and think of questions that have been asked of me and like, okay, just kind of go with the flow. But I know there's some inappropriate things that you're not allowed to ask. So I know some of those, but it's not my jam, so I'm glad we're having this.
Perfect. I appreciate that. And also I do want to have it open up towards the end of the presentation for questions too. So if you guys have anything that pops up, want to jot it down, feel free to do so. Okay, so conducting successful interviews. As you know, interviews are a critical step in the recruiting process. And so the experience that we provide candidates can affect our business reputation, customer satisfaction, and the type of talent you attract and keep. And in today's pool of candidates, they want to find more than just a job in their field. They want a career, flexibility, culture, and personal growth. And so having a strong interview process can help separate us from the competition and help us retain top talent. And I do want to add that, one thing that is super common when somebody is looking at job postings or, in the middle of their job search, looking up the company online, right? Checking Indeed and Glassdoor and LinkedIn and what's everyone saying online. So we've been really fortunate, obviously, to get really good feedback from our existing team on, just their experience here at C3. But that is a really important step. And so, if somebody interviews at C3 and they have a bad experience, like they can also go in and voice like, oh, I didn't have a good experience on Indeed and Glassdoor. So this is just really important for the brand's reputation as well. So tips for effective interviewing. Candidate screening, it's really important, if you guys are involved in an interview or get pulled in to be involved in stage 2 or stage 3, to review the candidate's resume and any initial screening notes prior to the interview. Proper screening allows you to ask informed questions and assess whether the candidate aligns with C3's core values and culture. Mindful screening refers to before scheduling a meeting with a candidate, it's super important to ensure all interview panel members' calendars are up to date to avoid any scheduling conflicts. I know that this one can be a bit of a challenge where, sometimes we're juggling a bunch of different calendars, and not only that, maybe the candidate themselves are working, so they have limited availability. So whenever there is a request to set up a candidate interview, it's just if you are involved in the interview process know that this is coming. Try your best to just make sure that that's up to date, just because it can be really challenging to confirm a time with a candidate and then have to go back and shuffle through everyone's calendars again. Also, mindful screening refers to aiming to minimize disruptions and consider setting your status on do not disturb during the interview. I know that we all have a lot on our plates, but we want to make sure that we are being mindful of the candidate's time and giving them all our attention. So drafting out questions ahead of time, as Amy was mentioning, is really important. And it's also helpful to ask each candidate the same question to make the process more objective and reduce bias. And something that can be really helpful is behavioral questions, which are a great way to uncover past behaviors that provide some sort of insight into a candidate's future actions. Interview prep, again, this is also really important. So we want to make sure that the team involved in the interview process is aligned on the interview process, is aware, who's involved in step 1, step 2, step 3, so forth, has a good understanding of the job description, and of course, C3's values and culture, and any areas to consider before the interview, including role clarity, interview structure, logistics, collaboration, who is this person going to be working with? Team involvement. As you guys can see, there's a variety of you guys in this meeting right now. So including senior level managers and key team members in interviews can provide a broader view of C3 and help candidates better understand our culture and our dynamics. It just kind of gives them a really good, better look as far as what our team looks like. And candidate observation, it can be helpful to use an interview evaluation tool to score candidate skills, qualifications, and record your observations. So this is really helpful post-interview, right? You meet with maybe your fellow interview panel members and say, hey, what were your thoughts? And really encompass one of the main C's, right? Collaboration into digesting the interview. Obviously, the candidate, did you like them? Maybe one person felt strongly versus the other. So that's just really important as well. And candidate observation also includes the timeliness and preparation of the candidate. So, and their interaction with the team members in the interview. So talking about all of that post-interview, obviously. Breaking the ice. A lot of times candidates can be nervous. Obviously, even if they are, a really well-polished candidate, maybe they haven't interviewed in a while. That happens to me very often. I'm usually the first round. So I often talk to people that I'm so sorry. It's been a while since I've interviewed. I apologize if I'm rusty. So breaking the ice is really important, helping candidates feel at ease, asking icebreaker questions related to appropriate non-work activities or subjects. Listening first, giving candidates ample time to provide thoughtful responses to your questions. Sometimes I think, especially if we're asking for them to give an example, it's important to be patient, right? They're nervous, they're thinking on their toes. And so we want to make sure that we give them time to come up with a thoughtful response. And saving a few minutes at the end of an interview to allow candidates to ask questions. That's also a really big one. Not only are we interviewing candidates, but oftentimes candidates are also interviewing us. So it's always a good sign when they're asking questions and curious about, C3's culture or the book of business that they're going to support, whatever it may be. Also keeping it legal, which we'll dive in a little bit later, but staying away from interview questions restricted by law. You can't ask a candidate about their age, race, creed, color, religion, national origin, gender, or any other category protected by your state laws. As a follow-up, taking detailed notes is really helpful. Good note-taking will help you make a clear decision when selecting a candidate. I know sometimes we might rely heavily on our memory, but just jotting down a few notes could help, especially distinguish candidates if you have back-to-back interviews or, oh, who was it that said that again? So note-taking is really important. And then following up with candidates. This is, pertaining to the candidate experience, right? We want to keep candidates informed throughout the process by providing updates and clear next steps, including expected timeframes on when they should hear back. This helps maintain their interest and demonstrates our commitment to a respectful and efficient hiring process. So, providing feedback to the team post-interview helps move this along, right? Making sure that we are being mindful of the candidate's time, respectful. Sometimes they are actively interviewing with a few different companies, so we want to be mindful of that as well. So this all just encompasses effective interviewing and providing candidates with a good experience. Now, some things to remember during interviews is time, right? So once the interview begins, respect the candidate's time, as we were just discussing, keeping an eye on the clock and making sure questions and conversations stay on target. Be prepared to answer any question and leave time for candidates to ask about the position, department, or company. Distractions, it can be a challenge to take time out to attend interviews, as we mentioned. So giving candidates your undivided attention, it shows them respect and courtesy and helps you focus and not miss important details. Always silence your phone and limit interruptions during the interview. Ask the same questions for every candidate. This allows you to make an accurate comparison for each. And we have an interview guide for you guys with specific evaluation criteria, and keep questions organized and consistent. And notes, like I just said, you might have a great memory, but it's still a good idea to take notes on each candidate. So it's often helpful regardless of whether interviews occur back to back or over several weeks. Now, behavioral interviewing can be a really effective tool and technique by, it's considered a helpful, effective technique by many human resources professionals, but you can use it to hire successful employees and increase your competitive edge. The goal behind it is to establish richer dialogue with candidates. You encourage responses that are providing specific examples of prior experiences rather than hypothetical or general answers. It's based on the idea that a candidate's past behaviors are the best way to predict how they'll behave in the future. Some examples are, what's an important goal you had to set and how did you progress towards that goal? Describe a time when you faced problems or stresses at work that tested your coping skills. Was there a time when you had to work closely with someone whose personality was very different than yours? How did you get the job done? What's the most creative work project you've completed? Or did you ever need to get information from someone who wasn't very responsive? You can also give candidates an example of a relevant or current problem at C3 and ask how they'd solved it. So these are all very helpful just to kind of evaluate and get an inside look on their behaviors, how they would approach something, how they've approached something in the past to tell how they might approach something in the future.
Olivia, can I just chime in on this one really quick? Sure. The best way I describe this is you do not want to ask yes, no questions, right? So I'll give an example. If I were sitting across my buddy Ray and I said, are you good at time management? I mean, he's probably going to tell me yes, or maybe he'll say no if he's not. I mean, I don't know. But if I were to say, are you great at epic activities, right? We know Ray crushes it. He's going to say yes. So instead, we don't want someone to just say yes or no. Mm-hmm. Tell me about how you stay organized. What do you do to stay ahead of activities, right? Like, so if you think of the WH questions, what, when, how, that's the most simple way I describe behavioral interviewing is you want to get them to talk about the answer, not just, are you detail oriented? Yeah. Are you good at working with difficult personalities? I mean, you're going to say, yeah, of course. So when you ask someone, what's your approach to working with personalities that are different? They're going to have to actually explain their answer. Ideally, what they're saying is how they've been successful in it. So hopefully that kind of just further expands on, try not to ask questions. I mean, look, if it's, are you available to work from 8 to 5? That can be a yes or no, question. But again, on the interviewing, as Olivia is saying, it's going to give you a better idea of how do they approach and solve for things. And that is a good predictor of what skills are they going to bring here. We're going to ultimately have to teach people how to interact in the C3 way, but ideally they're bringing a good foundation when they come over. So I just wanted to kind of expand on that.
Yeah, thanks for adding that on. We definitely want to avoid yes or no question type answers or questions during interviews. Something as simple as like, oh, do you have course of construction experience or dwelling fire experience. They could easily just say yes versus like, oh, tell me about your dwelling fire experience or course of construction experience. It's very different. So how we word questions is also really, really important. Trying to avoid just where they could say yes or no. Interview calibration. So when you spend time up front to calibrate the interview process and the type of candidate needed to fill any given role, it can ensure a consistent, inclusive, and objective process for every candidate. So this is ideally done right before we go out and search for candidates. When you establish, who's going to be involved in the interview process with your team, we want to make sure that we're all aware of what the process looks like, what next steps are. All of that is part of interview calibration. And so diversifying and educating is really important to foster diversity and inclusion. We involve team members from different roles and departments in the interview process. And this approach will not only promote a more inclusive environment, but showcase C3's vibrant culture and candidates. And ensure that everyone participating in interviews understands the process and how it reflects the C3's values and culture. There's some times where maybe somebody gets pulled on an interview and maybe they haven't been on that side of the table yet, or they're a little bit nervous. I know that I have had a couple people reach out to me about like, hey, how do I go about, what kind of questions, or I'm a little nervous. I've never been on this side of the table before. It's recommended you can do practice sessions with your teammates, organize practice interviews to help interviewers refine their skills and ensure a consistent approach, and make sure that, one gets comfortable being on the other side of the table. Calibration meetings means holding regular meetings to discuss and align on evaluation criteria and ensure all interviewers are on the same page. Sometimes we might have calibrated initially, right? And then we go out and search. And then we realize, oh, it seems like we're not all aligned as to what we're looking for. So these meetings are really helpful to make sure that we can reevaluate the need, what are the challenges that we're coming across, and again, ensuring that everyone is on the same page. Inclusive practices means training interviewers on techniques to assess candidates fairly and inclusively, ensuring a balanced evaluation of all applicants. And some common mistakes are openly discussing common interviewer mistakes and effective do's and don'ts. Addressing issues like asking inappropriate questions or focusing on irrelevant personal attributes such as race or gender to foster awareness and improve interview practices. And we'll dig into more of those. So here we're going to cover interview do's and don'ts. These are the questions, right, that some of us get a little bit nervous about. What is okay to ask and what is not okay to ask. It's important to understand the topics and questions you should and should not ask a candidate during an interview. And reviewing these do's and don'ts before the meeting will allow you to make the candidates feel at ease and avoid any potentially sticky topics. I actually want to see, Lindsay, do you want to take the lead on some of these?
Let me unmute myself. Sure. So I'll just kind of like read through it and then we can kind of talk about some examples. So by preparing them in advance, the type of questions that you may ask. So that can be something that as part of your hiring rec, if you guys decide if there's a couple like pre-questions, we can let them know, hey, during the interview, we're going to touch on these topics. So that is a potential tool that we can say, if Olivia does her screening notes and she sends it over and you guys as hiring team say, I really like it, but I want to dig into umbrella or excess a little bit more. We can have that. That can be a request from you guys, and Olivia can say, hey, here's your meeting, here's your invite, just FYI, the team wants you to expand in these areas. Well, then they can come prepared, right? Interviews are not meant to be like gotcha moments, right? That we hope we're like discovering some lie. It's very easy because we're making a very sensitive decision that we as interviewers often are on the defensive side, right? We feel like it's more of an interrogation to make sure are they being truthful, right? We want to come up to these things of and approach it more from a mindset of I want to really see them expand so I can understand, do they have a little bit of knowledge? Have they just been a part of a project, or have they really own it? So that's an example of kind of specific questions. We've talked about behavioral and situational questions. That's a good one. And of course, the do that we can do as part of it. Describing C3, our history, our culture, and teammates. You know, all of those, the do's are pretty obvious, right? It's really important in a remote and virtual day and age that we come prepared and on camera. There have been times where candidates have struggled, and we had one recently and they weren't on camera, and it really shifted the mood of the interview, and it puts everyone not in a good opportunity. We want to be able to see everyone's face. And so we just need to be able to, like Olivia said, you know, show our demeanor in the way our C3 culture is, you know, through a remote environment. What we don't want to do is like show up disheveled, late, right? Like apologizing, making it feel rushed. It ties in everything she said. It's just not a good experience. It looks like we're not taking them seriously. Interviewing can be very draining. Depending on the level and you know, the type of position, you might interview 10, 15 people. To them, it's their one interview, although it might be your 10th. And so taking the time and making the commitment so we can find the right people and making them feel as though they have the attention, it's, you know, it's important. Involve too many people in interviews. So this is a challenge. We try not to be overwhelming. You know, 3 to 1 is kind of a max. If you have 4 people in the room, that's just going to put anyone a little bit kind of on their back heels. We just got to use our best judgment, right, on when and how many people we have coming. The balance in that is we also don't want someone to go through like 5, 6 stages of interview if possible. So if when in doubt, lean on Olivia or myself, and we can kind of figure out if there seems to be too many people there. But you guys have all probably been in meetings where people just like to hear themselves talk, and then you feel like we're not really getting to the interview and everyone's just kind of talking about stuff. So that's kind of the, you know, dynamic there. And then, you know, this of course is professionalism. It leads with, I'm all like for self-deprecating humor and breaking the ice with funny things. Like I tend to talk about myself because then it's, you know, targeted at me. We just have to balance it, right? At the end of the day, we still need to get to the important conversations. So in an icebreaker setting and kind of towards the end, that's really where we can be a little bit more fun and light. But again, we don't want to make it too chummy that we feel like we're just connecting with the individual, meaning we really like the person and I'm just enjoying my time with them. And that overshadows really assessing them from a skill standpoint. So that's the general approach. Does that make sense? Does that help, Olivia? Does it feel like I tackled it? Yeah. Okay.
These next ones are more of the HR do's and don'ts topics. Yeah.
So here's the thing I'll say across the board. I mean, we'll go over it and we'll share it with you guys, but if you notice the list of can't talk about it topics, it's always growing. And particularly in California, it's going to continue to grow. So I understand it can feel daunting of like, I can't say that, or I can't say that, I'm not allowed to, right? So the thing I always say is what's the best practice is allow the candidate to lead with the information. You will never put yourself in a compromising position if you're not the one. If someone offers to say, you know, I'm 40 and I just hit my, you know, no problem. They shared it, they offered it, like, oh, that's great. I hope you have a great birthday, or whatever the thing is, right? You know, so if people say, oh, I've got kids, that comes up for me all the time in vendor conversations, right? Oh, you know, Suze is pregnant, had a thing, you know, you can share it. You just don't ask about the age. What can happen? I'll give you a perfect example. I have a nearly 1-year-old. They can assume if they didn't get hired, it's because they have a baby. And the assumption is you don't think they'll be able to do the job or be able to balance motherhood and at home and kids, and right? You can kind of see where it goes. So even if we determined it wasn't a good fit purely from a skill or experience standpoint, it opens us up to the potential for someone to say, it's because of the color of my skin. It's because of the age of my children. It's because of my own age. It's because I mentioned I'm hard of hearing, right? In these sort of areas. So again, when it comes to, you know, faith-based, if someone happens to share, you know, I'm a believer in, right? Like, that's wonderful. Don't, you know, opt into and ask more questions or probe, like, well, what church do you go to? Like, what affiliation, right? Just accept it and keep the conversation going. But in general, you don't want to get specific and let them lead with it. So that goes across all these, right? Disabilities, gender, sexual orientation, culture, religion, any of that kind of stuff. You just want to steer away from that. Does that make sense? I saw a lot of heads nodding, so I feel like I'm not, okay, good. Yeah. I know it gets tricky and people can get nervous. The more you do it, the more comfortable you become, but if you're ever not sure, I can give you a lot of one-on-one help on like how to dodge an awkward question. I'm a pro at those. So if someone happens to ask and what I'll tell everyone on this call and anyone is you always have the Lindsay card, right? So if anyone says anything, asks anything, you're like, you know what, I'm not sure, but I can find out for you. Let me kick it on over to Lindsay, right? This is kind of where it falls more into my field. So again, if someone says, you know, specific religious holidays, I need these specific days off to respect my holiday, or, you know, what about client meetings and someone has a headdress or something like that? We accommodate, we figure it out, and it's a non-issue. But if you, for some reason, are asked that question or feel comfortable, again, you can kind of play the get out of jail free card with Lindsay. Again, don't ask or engage further than maybe asking on the question. The sex one is this is important in our inclusive environment. You guys are probably well aware there's now pronouns and people will refer to themselves as they, them, him. So the best thing you can do is, again, let them lead. And if you hear themselves refer to themselves in a different name, pronoun, or something, maybe you felt like they were female and they're having different names, vice versa, just allow them to lead. And don't feel like you need to specifically ask, right? So, oh, I noticed your name is this, but I saw your pronoun. Do you want me, right? It's better to sort of steer away, address them by their name, and they can make, you know, an assertion if they feel comfortable doing so. Don't ask about, have you ever been arrested for your DUI? Don't ask about their criminal record. I'm actually not worried about this because we don't particularly run background checks. This isn't, you know, something that comes up regularly. But again, it's important to at least note, don't ask about any type of criminal record unless we're hiring, you know, someone specific in finance and we got to kind of talk about like, you know, is there fraud in your background or something? Let's just not. Ideally, everything's going to come up in our licensing process, right? So with licensing and all of that kind of stuff, we're going to find out and understand via that process. So don't ask about it. Race, I think, and religion, everyone on this call knows, don't do it. Don't ask.
That's pretty much everything.
Thank you.
So I think the other thing I just wanted to kind of say is, again, if you guys have like specific questions, usually for people, it's just navigating, like, there's two components, right? Like, how do we prep for interview? And then when I'm in the interview, how am I successful at it? And so, I got to tell you, the more you do it, the more successful you get at it. So, you know, just like any job, you might trip over something. And I just want everyone to do their best job. Now, if you happen to interview with someone and they say, oh, I've got a couple of young kids, and you're like, oh, how old? I have a 3-year-old. Like, it's going to be okay, right? It's just best practice. The more we get at it and the more we can get familiar with doing this sort of stuff, I'm confident we can still conduct successful interviews where we can gauge culture and fit and have a good time and not have it be so stuffy that we're not enjoying ourselves in the process, while still, you know, mitigating the compliance risk of, you know, crossing the lines on any stuff. And then really, you know, on Olivia's front, while of course all the HR stuff is really important to me, candidate experience is a big one. And, you know, timely responses, timely feedback from you guys, consistent feedback, the better you all are, the better Olivia can do her job. The more successful she is, the more successful you guys are in recruiting and getting people on your team members. It's a win-win all around. And so whatever we can do to really come back to this and say, are we really interviewing the best possible? Are we truly asking consistent questions with everyone that we interview? Or do we just kind of veer off in different areas? It's not to say we can't expand and have some be different, but there should still be a baseline, a foundation that we're really consistently assessing everyone to see who really is the most qualified person. The better we are at all that kind of pre-work stuff, again, it's going to make everything else a breeze. And timely feedback is a really, really important one. You know, it's a competitive job and labor market. And, you know, like Olivia said, some people maybe looking and actively have other, you know, offers on the table. And so we don't want to potentially lose someone that you guys really like. And then it's, oh, sorry, we didn't get back. I just was busy and it's a week later. Everyone's just going to be frustrated. So
I want to add to that usually I strive to give an update to candidates within a week, you know, like if it's more than a week has gone by, like it makes it clunky and, you know, people start checking in. So it's super important. One, just to go over everything again, calibrating the interview process, making sure everyone's on the same page, making sure that we understand, what things we're screening for, skill set, culture fit, all that stuff, but also providing that timely feedback is really helpful to just the overall interview process. It affects C3's brand and reputation and just the overall experience. And we want to make sure that we're living up to what's been said about us so far online.
I have one more thing to say before, and then questions. Your notes and email communication, we need to tighten those up.
Yes.
So some of the stuff that we ask, sometimes you guys put them in your email feedback, like, oh, I really liked them. They're a little bit older, or they have adult children or whatever. So we can't not do it in the interview and then have a documented email thread of things we're not supposed to ask. So let's not, I know all good intent, and that's why it's like this is why this is important, so that moving forward. But look, like notes of, hey, this person was great. I think they're a top contender. I love them. Like, no problem. I'm not saying you guys need to have like a paragraph, right? But I just want you guys to be mindful if there are things that are in some of those criteria, that's not being emailed, right? Because here's the flip side, right? We pass on a candidate and they file a unlawful hiring practice, right? We get subpoenaed. All of our emails and teams and everything gets looked at. And then now they see that we have an email thread that says like, she just like was so disheveled and her kids were running around in the back. That's our problem, right? Also, the emails and the notes and the feedback need to align with that. That was something earlier from Olivia when you were doing it. I was like, note to self, I want to like make that call out. I will stop talking now.
Thanks, guys. Hey, Olivia and Lindsay, can I just pile on one thing on a kind of under the theme of the do's and don'ts? Just one other thing, a tip, maybe it's just being self-aware of unconscious bias. And what I mean by that is like, it could be, I don't know, maybe this person went to a college where you maybe had a bad experience or had friends that went there that you didn't like, and that could unconsciously weigh on, or maybe somebody looks like or reminds you of a neighbor or somebody that was a jerk or something like that. It's just, we all have it. And I think it's important that we just make sure we check that and are aware of that as well.
That's a good point. That sometimes even might be where they come from, like where they're currently working or where they previously worked. I know insurance is a small world, and sometimes you cross paths with people that you might have worked with 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and maybe you didn't have a great experience at that agency, and maybe things changed after that person you left, or whatever it may be. So I've heard that as well. So that's a good one. Anybody have anything else they want to ask or chime in on?
I wanted to ask about the interview guide. Did you say you guys have one, like an interview guide and evaluation?
Well, we have an interview guide with all this information, actually. So if you scan this QR code, you get the flip book version, but I can go ahead and also make sure that we email this to the group. But basically all the information that we covered here today is compiled in an interview training guide. All the same information, all the just friendly reminders on effective interviewing, behavioral questions, the do's and don'ts, what you can ask and can't ask. But as far as like evaluation tools, I think that's something that, if we want to have like a form or something after, you interview to fill out, we can also develop that. I think that might be helpful. And I have come up with some examples in the past, but we've never really implemented them. So if that's something that would be helpful to the team and be useful, I'd definitely be happy to help get that feedback going.
Bullet point. So that was kind of my question. Like, do we need to prepare something to use? Is that the recommendation, or are we just?
Yeah, I think right now it's kind of dependent on team, right? So every team has their own different way of how they evaluate candidates. EB has their style, PNC has their style. So right now it's kind of set up that way, but I think it's important that, the team looks, again, post-interview, regroups and says, hey, what are the pros? What are the cons? What are must-haves? And, maybe what wasn't so great about the interview. Does that answer your question?
We can create like a boilerplate, like questionnaire, right? I mean, but my interviewing is going to be so intermittent that spaced out that I should probably freshen it up if I come up with the boilerplate questions, right?
Yeah, and there's, we have there are other departments, like when we hire for Kathy's department, my department, right? So we have different ones. The bulk of our hiring is primarily P&C. So we could probably start there, and then whatever active positions, you know, with personal lines, EB, we can kind of build out. I think there's two things that we can do that I think is answering your question, Carrie, is both like going into the interview, right, as your checklist, which you also then use as your evaluation form. And we can start simple, right? Like from a culture standpoint, are they checking the boxes? From a skills experience, are they checking the boxes? Like meeting the requirements of the job description. So it kind of depends on, if you think about our jobs descriptions, right? There's proven experience, nice to haves, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of your checklist, right? Like, so we don't have to rework the wheel, and we can just have something, and then it can expand the more we interview and more people are involved. So there's ideally anywhere we can standardize things, the better. It improves our chances of not being non-compliant, right? And going off the rails and all that kind of stuff. And it's also what I say, like with us, with anything, it's a guideline, right? It's not what I don't want is people being like, okay, tell me about your proven experience in Epic, like check, right? Because that's not going to flow. But the more we do it, if we have framework of sort of like, you can start on culture and come back to job, you can bounce back to culture, like conversations are going to flow. But if we have general categories, and at the end, it's sort of a, you know, do we think the person could do the job well? Do we think they're like an ace? Do we think, hey, there's 70% there, but, you know, with training, they could do a good job? Like, those are the questions we really want people thinking. That's what I'm hearing you ask. And I think that we can make strides towards that, right? Kind of creating those materials for you guys. And then that way you're, as teams, going back to the calibration, ideally when we have a rec and Olivia kind of collects all the criteria, and she's like, great, it's posted, she's off to the races. And then you guys are just kind of waiting until you start to see people. Well, maybe there's a step in that process. Once it's posted, that's when ideally people are going to interview, right? If it's construction, hey, Megan, we're going to want to like tee you in. You guys should just re-review. What is the job posting? What are the things we really need? What are must-haves? Not that could be a step in the process that we can add in that helps to make sure everyone's kind of got their marching orders on it. So, I think there's just some good takeaways that we could make, and I don't think that's too much lift.
Lindsay, can I just say something? This is Chris. Just coming from a different agency, and when I first started, I like had to start interviewing for a new, you know, to fill a role right away. And the interviewing process is just like the different expectations. I wasn't aware. I was going off of my own, and it's not a bad. So I really think that like checklist or whatever as to like maybe what you guys are looking for feedback, just so we have that we can jot notes down and then send that recap to Olivia, because I know I kind of bounce back and forth with Olivia a little bit, and I'm like, well, I'm kind of used to my style at my old agency. Being a new person coming in, or someone starting fresh into interviewing, I think that would be really helpful.
Awesome.
I think we can come up with something like basic that might be helpful, just to kind of,
and then we can get it started, and then as you guys are using it, like with anything, we get it off the ground, and then as we do it, if there's things we want to add to it or change, like this will just evolve, and then we'll look at this a year from now and being like, oh, remember when we like didn't have a checklist, and then we're like, look at our checklist now. So this is the beauty of innovation. So yeah,
thank you guys so much for, again, taking some time to hang out with us and go over these exciting topics. Again, if you are interested, you scan the QR code. It's really cool. You can flip through the guide, but I can also make sure that I send the copy of the interview guide to the team just for reference and to have handy.
Yeah.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks so much.